All right, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us. Welcome. My name is James Collins. I'm one of the student recruitment coordinators here at Monash Business School. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're safe during what's been a pretty difficult few months for everybody at the moment. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started today. I'm going to be recording this session so that we can really pass it on to any students who miss out on the opportunity this afternoon. If you do have any questions, you should be able to access the Q&A in the chat box. Paul, who's going to be talking shortly, will be going through a presentation which will last about 20 minutes or so, and we're hoping to leave about 10 minutes at the end of the session for any questions you have. But really, we would like to make this session as interactive as possible. So please do write any questions you have in the box. If I can just plug one other event before we get started, for any of you who are joining the call who might also be interested in the Master of Economics and Econometrics, a presentation much like the one today will be taking place tomorrow at 3 p.m. So feel free to join that. And I'll also be attaching in the link, in the chat box, a link to a Calendly booking session. So if you would like to discuss your individual circumstances, or if you'd like some more information about other courses provided at Monash Business School, we can book that for you. So you'll either be speaking to myself or my colleagues, Catherine or Natalie. So without further ado, it'd be great pleasure to introduce our course director for our Master of Global Business program, Paul Calfadelis. Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to this brief but hopefully informative introduction to the Master of Global Business and the potential for you to think about this program in terms of your further studies in the postgraduate space. Paul Calfadelis is my name, as James has pointed out. I'm the course director of the Master of Global Business, and just briefly, I've been at Monash for the last nearly 23 years, and global business, international business is the area of research, teaching. That's the main area in which I'm intimately involved in. So what I want to do is take you through a little bit of a discussion on the program and let you know a little bit about the Master of Global Business and give you a bit of a sense of what we're looking for and the type of units you're likely to be doing in the program. So we went through a review and introduced the Master of Global Business 2 years ago. And fundamentally, it's business, but from a multidisciplinary perspective, looking at the global environment in which really business takes place. So the whole idea behind the program is very much to give working professionals and high-performing recent graduates, and I'll come to that in a moment, a sense of a global mindset, helping them develop a global mindset which they can apply to the workplace. So in other words, trying to think more broadly about the consequences for business in terms of what is happening internationally. And in order to do this, we basically revamped what used to be traditionally an international business program into the Master of Global Business, which is broader in its outlook and broader in the thinking of what we're trying to get across to students. And so the program is set in that it is specific to global business, and as it points out there, it's fundamentally you have course component of core units and electives. And I'll come to the elective shortly, but course component is, and you'll see this is where the multidisciplinary perspective comes into it. So there are no advanced preparatory units. It's assumed if you've got an undergraduate degree in any area and a work experience, that you would be eminently suitable to think about, suited to think about potentially doing this program. So as you can see there, the units that we teach in the program: global business, sustainable business innovation. Global trade governance is understanding, in a sense, what happens legally in terms of international trade and how that's overseen globally. International trade policy, which looks at specific issues around trade. Then we have geopolitics and business globalization. And this is looking at really politics and how it affects business. You'll find a lot of traditional international business programs are very much about international marketing, international management, international accounting. We've revamped the thinking and basically looking at it from, like I said, a more multidisciplinary perspective. So we have geopolitics. So then we have intercultural communication and negotiation, and need to understand something about what happens interculturally if we're going to engage internationally. And then a fairly typical business unit, strategic management, understanding what management and what strategy means for business, whether that's happening domestically or globally. So as you can see there, the program is multidisciplinary, fairly broad, sustainable business and innovation. Again, new type of units into a broad-based master's program, which seeks to accommodate, I would argue, where we're headed in terms of sustainable development goals and how we're going to engage internationally around the issues of the globe faces. They're the 7 core units in the program. An 8th unit, which is also compulsory, is what we call global business in practice. And that's at least 6 points. You can also do more of these as part of your elective choices, but there are options there of an industry internship. So that may be working in a company or an organizational project where 3 or 4 people may be working on a specific project, again, in a corporate setting. Overseas study tour, or overseas units, which can be completed as part of an international exchange, which are offered. And then finally, there's a creativity and entrepreneurship unit, which also allows a practical element, and that's why we have it there. So as you can see there, you've got 7 core units, and the 8th core unit, so to speak, but from which you have a choice, is a practicum or a practically based unit. Okay, so, and this gives you a little bit of a sequence of the program, and in terms of, so how you go about thinking about completing your Master of Global Business units. And what is important here to understand is that generally we encourage students to think about completing their core units, those highlighted in blue, most likely in their first year of study. So if you're a full-time student, we generally encourage you to think about completing most of these units in your first year. It's not a hard and fast rule. There may be opportunities for you to maybe in your first year or first semester choose 2 core units and 2 electives. And that may also depend upon what elective stream you're looking to pursue. And I'll come to that in a moment. But fundamentally, once you have completed your core units, and I normally encourage students to think about the global business in practice, generally in their second year, either in the first semester or the second semester. There are also opportunities where we have summer semesters or winter semesters, which may have study trips, and students can complete that part of that global business in practice in either a winter or a summer semester. A slight change now, just important to understand, all the core units, bar 2, are offered every semester. This is suggested. It's not a hard and fast rule. So you may have opted to do some other units as an elective in semester 1, and you can't do geopolitics and business globalization. Well, generally, all those units are offered across both semesters. However, there are 2 units which are only offered in 1 semester. So global business, the unit that I run, is only offered in semester 1. So if you were to think about starting the program next year in first semester, I highly encourage you to think about taking that first unit in first semester. In a sense, it sets the scene for the whole program. And if you can't do it in first semester, then you have to think about that, especially depending upon your course sequencing, that you can only then subsequently do it in the first semester of the following year, assuming you're in a 2-year program. The other unit, Global Trade Governance, will only be offered in second semester, and these changes are as of next year. So in that sense, 2 of those units are more or less set. They're not offered every semester. What I want to highlight here is the importance of flexibility in the program. So the idea of studying global business is very much about providing you a core element of studying global business and understanding what happens in business internationally. But then if you're interested, however you may be interested, there is a realm of different options for you to then focus in on an area of special interest to you. So you may combine global business with management units or supply chain units or marketing, and in a sense have a sub-major. We don't call it as such. I tend to call them focus areas. But often you can combine global business with other areas of an elective interest. You can go to different faculties. You may do sustainability in the Sustainability Institute in the Arts faculty, or you can do international relations. So you may want to do global business and international relations, or you may want to do global business and supply chain, or global business and entrepreneurship. And so so those, at the moment, we have students, and this is where I said before, it may not be possible to do all the core units in the first and second year, because some of the streams like entrepreneurship encourage you to do a number of units in your first semester, because they then have projects which follow, which they want you to do in subsequent form in your third and fourth semesters. So it may be that you choose some of your electives early, but then you ultimately finish your Master of Global Business core units throughout your 4 semesters. So these are suggested areas only. You don't have to take a specialization or a focus area. You may decide I want to do 2 units of management, 2 units of supply chain, or I want to do an internship and a study trip. And that one internship will count as your core. The study trip then can count as electives. So there's a lot of flexibility in the program. Once you've completed your core, we're not really fussed where you go and you do your electives. Having said that, some electives have prerequisites. So you wouldn't be allowed to go off into the law department and do a law unit, or because you specifically need to be enrolled in law, or medicine. But for many other units in the faculty, in the arts faculty, in the humanities, you may have an option of basically following your interests that you want to combine with global business. The other important point I'd like to highlight is that there is international experience opportunities in the program, and we have a special arrangement with Berkeley Haas Global Access Program in the US, in San Francisco, where students can go over and complete as part of their electives. So, and we've had a student who's there at the moment who went last year, at the start of this year. So the idea here is you choose to do your electives at Berkeley under the Berkeley Haas Access Program. And so what happens here, you finish your core units, and I'll give you the example of that. The student who finished his core units, did a study trip, and then subsequently has opted to do his final year at Berkeley. And so what happens in the Berkeley program is you're linked in with the Global Access Program at Berkeley Haas, and that is very much a hands-on program. Having said that, you can't do a range of units at Berkeley. There are a range, but they tend to be in the marketing / entrepreneurship space. It's a specific program which we've linked into. You can't go to Berkeley and do, say, international relations. That's not possible. So what the strong idea here is, as you'll see in the third point there, is it complements the in-class learning with special program enhancements, including visits to Silicon Valley, one-on-one career coaching. It's very much in that entrepreneurial startup innovation space, marketing of those sort of ideas as well. And so it's a very much a hands-on type of program. And like I say, on the second point, you can opt to do a 1 semester or both semesters at Berkeley, if you have a 1.5 or a 2-year program, depending upon the length of your program. And that's where I want to sort of touch upon now. Now, fundamentally, the Master of Global Business can be finished from 1.5 or 2 years, depending upon prior experience and what you've prior experience in terms of what you've studied and your work experience. So, and we've had students who have basically enrolled in the program for 1 year full time, and this year, and they finished in a year. So what that means is normally a master's program is of 2 years duration. But if you've got a cognate degree, that means a degree in a related area. And we're fairly broad in terms of what is a related area. So it could be a business degree, an international relations degree, an arts degree with, you know, history and geography and politics, or it could be a global studies degree. You will get 4 units of credit for having a cognate degree. So that brings down a 2-year program to 1.5 years. And that you'll see there, the 1.5 years full time, a bachelor degree in a cognate discipline. You can cut down a further 4 credit points by having at least 5 years employment experience in a related area. And again, we're fairly liberal on how we view related area in terms of work experience. So if you've worked for a number of years, 5 years, and we look at, you know, internships, and we look at your application holistically, and we try to get a sense of what your background is, where you've worked, what sort, you know, it may have been in administration, but it needs to be, in a sense, legitimate work, which is testing you and pushing you to understand the work environment. And if we're going to give you the credit, and that work needs to have been for 5 years at this point. And so that means that you can cut a 2-year degree to 1 year, and I'm here talking about full time. The program is offered part-time, and you just have to double the time span in terms of a program which is based on part-time. And fundamentally, the issue there is because we normally envisage people doing 2 units per semester, not 4, as is in a full-time load. Having said that, in the part-time space, we are quite a bit more flexible in that students can basically sometimes take 1 unit per semester, depending upon their work commitments, or sometimes intermit, etc. And then fundamentally, you have a normal program, and sometimes a lot of international students opt for a 2-year degree because they want a 2-year work visa at the end of that in Australia, and they can opt for a 2-year full-time degree in which they finish their program in 2 years. So some final thoughts. What the program does is get you job ready in terms of understanding the international context of business. And in a sense, it's a hands-on course. Yes, there's theory, don't get me wrong. It's a master's program. In the end, you're getting a master's degree, but also very practical in terms of trying to give you practical understanding of understanding business. Excellent opportunity. It's not a huge program, so excellent opportunity to meet fellow students, establish friendships, and a certain collegiality and camaraderie that you see develop amongst the student cohort. And also an opportunity to be involved, I think, in many extracurricular activities that you can be part of as they happen around Monash University. And that includes clubs, activities, some think tanks, mentoring programs, volunteer experiences, and often some even specialised short-term internships that the government provides around this space, which are non-credit based, but also very good in terms of opportunity for practical experience. That's all I wanted to say. So have a think about it. The program is, I think, fairly cutting edge. We're trying to give you a real understanding of what happens globally and how it is very much interlinked in terms of understanding what happens in business. Thanks very much, and I'm open to any questions.
Paul, thank you very much for that. That's been really useful. Just a couple of questions, not so much through the audience online, but certainly questions which I get when I'm talking to students both in Australia and overseas. Class sizes. Now, it's quite a small class size, isn't it, at the moment? What can students expect?
Probably 20 odd, 25 students. It will vary depending upon units, because some of the units are also what we call co-tagged in other master's programs. So, for example, intercultural communication and negotiation is part of the core for the Master of Global Business, but it's also a core unit for the Master of Management. Similarly with sustainable development, sustainable business and innovation. So some units have a smaller cohort, other units have a bigger cohort because other programs feed into them. But generally you're looking at about 20 to 25 students.
And I think that's really quite unique. Certainly when you look at some other programs like a Master of Business or Accounting, it's not uncommon to be in a class of 200 or 300.
No, that rarely happens. And these are about a good, probably on that, these are often seminar classes or a combination of seminar, 3-hour seminar, or it may be 1 hour of recording and a 2 hour of seminar whereby you engage very much with the academics. Some courses are offered in the evening, others are offered in what we call intensive mode. So for example, my unit, you potentially would do it 6 days over 6 weeks, and you come for a full day, so 9 to 4. And the idea there is to help build a collegiality and camaraderie with the student cohort so everyone gets to know each other over it. So the delivery mode will vary depending upon the unit.
But it's certainly possible to study this program whilst working full time, and I presume some of your students are doing that anyway.
And a lot do. And so even people, so some people are working and they may do a traditional unit over 12 weeks and they come in the evening, or they may decide they want to do my unit and then say global business and do it over 6 consecutive weeks. They may get some study leave or take 3 days of study leave and 3 days of annual leave and basically lock off those 3 days. And they do 1 unit or maybe 2 units, and then they're basically working as such. So very, very amenable to part-time study.
Paul, we've had a question from Cody here. Can Monash source the internships as part of the core unit? If so, what examples of companies that students have interned in that Monash has sourced? Well, if I can just help answer the end part of that question, Cody. Certainly the business school work with over 500 different companies. So those companies will be local companies, national companies, international companies. To give you an idea, I was speaking to a student yesterday who was doing one of our talks for us. She's working for Goldman Sachs in New York. Now, we do have a very large department at Monash whose job is really to find students internships and work experience. The majority of our programs at the undergraduate and postgraduate level will have what we typically call a capstone unit, where it's your option to either undertake a study overseas visit, as Paul talked about, a study tour, or work integrated learning. And in many cases, you can actually do both by taking elective units in both of those areas. Now, it goes without saying, we cannot guarantee you a job following your degree. That's really up to you. What I like to say is that Monash opens the door. We will help you try and find an internship, certainly on most programs anyway, and then it's up to you to deliver once you're in that program. Paul, have you got anything specific you can mention about?
We're actually going through a process at the moment where we've got an export company that came to us and is keen on an intern for the first 3 months of next year, and that will count as part of their internship. We've had other interns go to KPMG and do specific projects. So it's not just about an intern with a role. It may be a role, or it may be a specific project that they want solved, or an issue that they want solved, and you get 2 or 3 people in there and they're working in-house, in a sense like somewhat of a consultancy, to try to solve a project. So it can vary. And the other issue is that students may also have the opportunity to source their own. So if students are aware of the company or want to and approach a company and can source their own, we're happy to accommodate that under the WIL program or under some other units which we have around corporate projects or around internships. So like you said, James, we try very much, as to try to fit students into programs, into projects and internships, which accommodate the needs of students, but also is a fit as well. Because I mean, the important thing here is that you gain something out of the project or the internship in terms of a learning experience. And all these are accessible. It's part of your academic curriculum as such. So it's not just about being there. You actually have assessment to do, etc.
And one of the things I often mention to students, Cody, is to make sure that when you are talking to universities, and of course, go and speak to as many universities as you can if you're looking at investing your time and money in a postgraduate, find out what the outcomes are for those programs. And certainly what I would suggest, particularly at the postgraduate level, is you want to be making sure that you get some level of return on investment once you complete your program. The one thing I've found, having spent a couple of years working at Monash and also working at a few other universities in Australia, when you're working with a top 60 university in the world, and certainly for some of our areas we're in the top 30 or 40 in the world, you actually have companies coming to Monash saying, look, can we work with your students? Instead of other universities going out to companies and saying, hey, look, can you take some of our students? It's actually reversed in many ways with those top universities in Australia, so the group of 8, if you like. Paul, I don't think we've got any more questions coming through yet. So, Cody, if you haven't got any other follow-ups, or Alex, I hope you found today's session useful. Paul, thank you very much for your time as well. And we look forward to welcoming possibly some students to MGB shortly.
More than happy to provide this presentation. And if there are further questions, I'm pretty sure students can get in touch with you, James, and then you can pass them on to me.
Yeah.
You can address them directly with the students.
I'll tell you what, before we finish today's presentation, I'm just going to put into the chat my email address. So if there was anything specific you'd like to ask, please get in contact with me. So it's james.collins2@monash.edu, and we can go from there. All right. Thanks, Paul.
My pleasure. All the best.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Bye.